Hi, welcome. Thank for coming to the Psychology of Popularity. I'm glad that you selected this course, and I'm excited to tell you about some of the work that I've been doing and lots of research have been doing in the area of popularity. But when we talk about popularity, a lot of people will sometimes say, is this really a subject that people studying in psychology? Isn't this just something that is important in high school or in adolescence? What difference does this really make in the real world? So maybe a good way to start is for us to talk a little bit about how popularity really does play an important role, and it plays an important role actually throughout the entire lifespan. So first of all, of course, when we think about who cares about popularity, we think about children. And in this graphic, what you can see is that even starting at very young ages, in this graphic in form of 30 years ago, children spent far more time on the working house surrounded by their peers than surrounded by adults. And you can see here that between the ages if about to all the when until preadolescence, there's this dramatic and increasing tendency for kids to interact with their peer. So of course, if those interactions are aversive, defective filled with victimizations, that going to have a big effect on the developing child. What you don't see after this graphic is that this trend just increase dramatically into adolescence. So once kids get into adolescence, of course it's totally uncool to spend any time with adults, and we see even more increases in the amount of time spent with peer. In fact, what we know is that starting at the age of 3, young children can already tell you which kids are the most popular, which kids the least popularity, and which kids kind of not flirting with the peer at all. So starting from very early in childhood, popularity becomes a really important construct available that really that impact over time. Now once we pass through childhood and we got into adolescence, there are actually some biological reasons why popularity starts playing a big role. So what you can see here, this is graphics of the brain, and what we now is that from the time that pubertal transient starts, adolescent brains start to mature, but the whole brain doesn't mature the exact same time. It actually starts in the back, and then the development of the brain kind of moves at forward. So what that means is that the parts of the brain that are developing the most as the parts that are below the connect. In other words, the parts that are shared with most mammals and those things are kind of instinctually drives and things that you want for quick growth, and one of those pieces in the limbic system that's really important in the desire for social rewards, and the reason why in adolescence there's this big push for our brains telling us to go at gain social roads is because it's of happen as to develop autonomy from adults. It's basically telling us your parents aren't cool anymore. You want to be able to go out and learn how to be self-sufficient. You are not going to be taken care of by your parents for the rest of your life. So our brains make us really interesting in hanging out with peers, being very excited about what happens with peers. And as a result, we tend to be very interested in whatever we can to do make us want to get rewards from people our age, and simultaneously we become less interested in adults, so that's totally natural. Unfortunately, all that develops before the part of the brain in the front that helps us to exert control over those impulses and keep us from doing things impulsive that doesn't develop and clean daily, so what don't really see that happen, which is one in indolence. There's lots of risk taking behavior. So that's why we see this huge increase in a desire to do what peers do and care what peers think and indolence. So that's a big part of what's happened is we growed up. And of course, when we think about indolence, usually the thing we remember the most and not the thing that happened with our parents or the thing that happened with our courses in high school. But when really think about who was popular, how much was I embarrassed in front of other peers, how much can I make sure that I mean people to be friends with or to date, and that becomes really important. So what about with adults? Well, I mean, one interesting thing about adulthood is that for some reason adults love talking about this adolescence in terms of popularity. And if you look at scenes that you see on TV or thousand of especially movies out there are tons of movies that kind of brings us back to those times in adolescence. And we really talking about peer relationships and friendships. There a reason why we really interested in that and that from nostalgic value. But maybe there's a reason one we also cares about popularity, the adults. That has to do with present day. If you think about it, there's a lot of ways that in our adulthood life we are still thinking about and probably really affected by popularity. And hopefully that's why you are here. You are here so that way you can get an idea about how popularity in affecting how happy you are today, how successful you are today, and how your relationships are going today. There are a lot of different ways that we see this, and probably now much more than we have seen for decades earlier. We see all this reflected in social media. So social media is really pulling us all back into that and adolescent world of caring about who responded to our Facebook likes and posts and how many Twitter followers we have and which pictures we put up and how many people have paid attention to that. It's kind of in a way of playing out this idea of popularity all over again, but it's doing in a way that's explicit and measurable, and there's numbers next to it. And people sometimes even get very hype and about how often their posts have been paid attention to. Or they seem to drain and get more relationship through social media. So it's affecting us adults, it's certainly affecting these adolescents growing up today, but it's also affecting as adults another when that we really see popularity playing a role is our big fiction with celebrities. And if you think about it, celebrities are kind of the popularity kids in the adult house school for some reason, and all you have to do is go to the grocery store and kind of see all the magazine there. We are remarkably concerned about what they're doing and what they look like and what they say and what their opinions are. This is even a big marketing strategy to get celebrity in does with the idea that a celebrity buys a product or espouses a worldview we might be more likely to have similar attitudes. And the reason why is it's playing up on this same idea of popularity. Thus well we'll see what those people do the highly illusions. In fact, a lot of marketing is really geared towards leveraging the same types of popularity dynamics in current day. And when you think about marketing from the perspective of political marketing, we really think that when it comes to campaigns and presidential campaigns. They're really a way in which we're trained to be pulled towards the same types of popularity politics, and that really plays an important role, and it's something that affecting our whole culture, and that has a lot to do with popularity. But even if we go beyond the perspective of the entire culture, how is popularity affecting life? What are things that you are experiences every day that have a lot to do with popularity, as many of us have studied in it in childhood and adolescence. Well, if you work in an office with other people, then you've probably noticed that there are some ways that the office has some of the kinds of cliques and groups and reputations that they are all in high school. It might be far more fixated, is might be presented in a that's a little bit different. No one is kids of playing on a playground or teasing kids that have to sit in the corner of the room in the workplace, but there are ways in which some people tend to have much more influence in meetings. People really want to hear what they have to say. They have a way of really getting people laughing. They might stay in the doorframe, having conversations with their co-workers a lot, whereas other people, they are not invited to lunch. They really aren't someone that people want to affiliate with. Don't all that really affects work performance. That affects how much the company overall is successful. That even affects how long people will stay in the job, and a lot of that have to do with popularity. We also see this, of course, play a role in all of our relationships. So whether it's our adulthood, friendship, and how much we feel we getting support from friends in time of stress, or how much we feel in our friendship groups. There are some people who tend to be the boss and tell everyone what they are doing and what the plans are and whose house you are meeting at, versus those that tend to still feel a little bit like this on the outskirts of the social group, or they are not the ones in the neighborhood that are often invited to all of the events that all about popularity too. In fact, we even see that play a big role when it comes to romantic bonds. Who you meet, how dating goes, how we feel during a date, then after dust our satisfaction in our marital relationships, of other kinds of romantic partnerships. A lot of that stems from the things we learn about popularity, of course. For those of us that are parents in our adulthood, we also found that parenting is something really tied into popularity as well. We know that the way that you experience popularity as a child is related to the kind of person you are. And we also know that it affects your own children's level of popularity and whether they do well at school or if they don't do as well with their peers. We also note that how kids deal with popularity today, especially in the world of social media, are very different than how we all deal with this thing back when we were kids, we before social media even got started. So that's something we are going to talk about there well. So overall, what we going to talk about for the rest of this course is specifically why popularity is so important. Why is it that this is something that we all seem to care so much about when we are young, and it continues to play out in all these different ways in adulthood. We are going to talk also about how we study popularity scientifically and using that scientific research you do we note about what predicts who is popular across lots of different settings and across the lifespan, and how popularity predicts our life outcomes overall. and we're going to talk about all of these things over the course of the next few lectures. So thank again for joining. Really excited that you're here and excited to keep on going with the next clip.